Patty, are you? Good evening and welcome to the Common Council for December 8th, 2015. Clerk, will call the roll, please.
Fowler. Here. Fernsler.
Here.
Markham. Hanson.
Present.
Nelson.
Here.
Sedlacek.
Present.
Hildebrand.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Let the record show we have a quorum. Next item is the pledge. Please stand. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's Common Council meeting. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion.
So move Alder Williams. Second Hildebrand.
We have a first and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Sedlacek.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Fernsler.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Item 4 is the audience portion where we ask people to sign up and be recognized by the chair. Tonight, we have one person sign up, Barbara Spicker? Ma'am, please, you can either stand there or come forward to the podium and address the council right here.
This is the point.
Sure, thank you.
Hi, my name is Barbara Speaker, and I live at 225 Appleton Street, which is over by the depot. My issue is related to the train, and although there are many train issues, the one I'm talking about started Friday night at 3 a.m. when they dropped off an engine, and they left it run for 33 hours in our backyard. And I wish I could have you all to my house to listen to how that sounds. Thump, 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 hour after hour, and that's what we put up with. A lot of us couldn't sleep. They picked the engine up at 1:30 in the afternoon. 10:30 last night, they dropped off another one, and when I left the house at 6 o'clock, it was still running 20 hours. And it makes your throat and your eyes burn, whatever is going into the environment. I spent all of Friday and today on the phone. I lost a whole day's work today. I went door to door. People are talking about moving. They're talking about not sleeping. They're talking about losing their sanity, which is how I'm feeling. What I'd like to see happen, and what did not happen for me, is that anybody at City Hall taking the responsibility for what they have so enthusiastically and misguidedly invited into the city. There doesn't seem to be any communication lines open with the railroad. At least if there is, it didn't change anything. What I discovered, of course, is that the railroad is next to God. They have all the power, and so I don't even know if anything can be done about it. But I didn't time myself. I know I only have 3 minutes. But I'd like to, if we could just negotiate with the railroad about a responsible way to conduct their business. I know we can't stop them. I learned that they have to leave an engine running or plug it in because there's water circulating with that diesel, and in the winter, it'll freeze up the engine if they don't do one of those two things. And so that gave me somewhat of an explanation, but why they decided to park it in the middle of that residential area and not take it somewhere to plug in, I don't know. I'd like to see Plymouth, and I called the DNR amongst many other things, and I've sent letters to the mayor and the aldermen and Senator Grothman and many others. But it is just to step up and try to protect us residents from this. There's other issues, like I said, but I won't talk about those tonight. And we were told when the railroad went through that it would be going a couple times a week during the day, and it doesn't just go through. It goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and there's a bazillion crossings. So anyway, that's the other issue. But thank you for letting me talk, and I hope you can see yourself clear to trying to get that engine moved, because the people are talking about moving into motels and trying to get away from it. And honestly, thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Item 5 is not needed. There are no items removed from the consent agenda. Item 6, new business. Discussion and possible action regarding 31 East Mill Street. Administrator Jurgis, you want to give us the summary on that, please?
Sure. You have a memo in your packet, and hopefully you've had a time to review that. But in the case, you may recall that the Redevelopment Authority acquired that property a couple of years ago. That's a property where we've historically had both policing issues and property maintenance issues at that location. And the building was in a trust, and there were no heirs to the for the property, and so the Redevelopment Authority, with the City Council approval, ended up acquiring that property. We then had it listed with Pleasant View for a while. We had a couple of interested parties, but once they got the legal paperwork related to purchasing it with a guarantee that they had to rehab it, they backed away from that. The RDA last year said, well, let's continue the listing through June of this year, and then at that point is, if we have no interested party, let's talk about it again and consider maybe raising the building. So June came and went, although we had the Highway 67 project going on, and as part of that project, DOT closed the driveway without our approval, and it was a misstep in the design process that they just missed the driveway and didn't realize there was a driveway there, and because of the grade change during construction, they had no option but to close that driveway. From what I understand, after talking with Attorney Fieber and reviewing our Highway 67 project agreement, basically any claims related, or any damages or claims related to changing of grades from the Highway 67 project ends up being the municipality's responsibility. And so we were hopeful that we would get some compensation for that driveway taking, but it doesn't look to be the case. So we were waiting to sort those issues out before we put it back on the RDA agenda. We just put it on the agenda for the December meeting, and what the committee recommended. Well, first of all, they asked for can you get a quote as to what the cost would be to raise the building, and we got that quote, which was $16,500. I believe the range to raise it will be between $12,000 and $16,500. I think the $16,500 might be a little high, but then again, the person we got the quote from has been the low bidder on other projects that the city's been involved in, and we've awarded raise contracts to him before. So 16.5 could be accurate. It could be a little bit high, and that's why I say the range might be between that 12 and 16.5. What the RDA recommended was for a period of 1 year to consider relisting the property for $1, and that the city should offer a $15,000 development incentive in lieu of spending that $15,000 or $16,000 on tearing it down, and see if we could get an interested party over the next year, call it December of next year, as an incentive to try and get someone to rehab it. And if no buyers come forward and no interested party comes forward, then the RDA would rediscuss it and potentially request funds to tear it down. The building inspector's not here tonight, but they're, and I told him he didn't have to be tonight, but yeah, you know, there is some structural issues with the facade that we're concerned about. There's a failing beam, and that failing beam, if you actually stand in the City Hall parking lot and you look across, you can kind of see the middle of the building sag, and because of that sagging, it started to almost it's resulted in a large cracks on the facade, which I don't necessarily know they've gotten worse in the last year, but they certainly have gotten worse in the last 3 to 4 years. Is it an immediate danger that the whole facade is gonna fall off? I don't believe so, but if nothing happens with the building, that cracking will get worse and that beam will continue to fail. So that's probably the biggest structural issue with it. I think we figure total cost for someone to rehab that could be a little less than 100 to all the way to 150, that range. I guess it would depend on how much work they would do themselves versus hiring a contractor.
Okay.
Any questions for me on the memo or what I ran through?
Questions? John?
I guess
Alderman
my biggest
Nelson.
question would be, is there a place to park? So if there are no parking spaces associated with that, what value does that building really have?
Yeah, and that's the argument that we shared with DOT as well, because there's one, by ordinance, there can't be any apartments on the lower level, but clearly the upper level could be one nice apartment. There is no parking on site. There's not going to be parking on site. Probably, one of the things that came up in the discussion with DOT said is, well, you have an avenue to change your ordinance and allow overnight parking or something like that. I would say that if we wanted to, we could look at some sort of special arrangement for overnight parking in the city parking lot for a special agreement for that property. I hesitate toward that because then it's the me too, well, what about our building? But that would be the one option, or the option would be on the opposite corner is a privately held parking lot for a owner of that building to negotiate something with the owner of the other parking lot across the street.
Go ahead.
But you also have to consider return on investment. For somebody to stick $75,000 in there, you have to get considerable rent to pay that back. It just doesn't make sense to me that it's not a prime spot for business or residential. I just don't see any value in doing that. But
It's about, I think it's a little less than 1,200 square feet per floor, so it's
I mean,
limited.
it's space.
Alderman
but-
Fernsler?
Yeah, we had this on sale for a year,
More than a year
and
for a
no
buck.
one took it?
For basically a buck. I think there are two different parties at times were interested in it. We actually drafted the development agreement, but what ended up happening was once they saw that there was a guarantee that they actually had to follow through and rehab the building within, let's say, 12 months, or the mechanism was if they didn't complete that work, the property could potentially revert back to the city. That they backed out of the deal.
Well, when you look at that and you say you have a structural problem and you're offering 15,000, I don't think 15,000 is gonna cover any of that major structural that you're gonna talk about. I just soon see you dump it, clean it, tear it down, get rid of it. I mean, you have no parking. That's the major thing. Even if you park across the street, it's still gonna rain and still gonna snow, and you're gonna have to walk across that street.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? Alderman Williams?
Because of the loss of the driveway, if that building comes down, there's not going to be, the interest currently is nil, and there's going to be even less if that is just a vacant lot there, without the parking situation being somewhat, I think, remedied. The land is such that we've had the conversation before, there's about only one individual in that block that can utilize that property unless we wanted to turn it into another mini park, and I don't think we want to do that. I am against basically tearing down older buildings on our Mill Street, but this thing is becoming an eyesore. It has been listed as Brian said, for over a year now. And we thought we had a couple individuals very interested in rehabbing that. As Brian indicated, that fell through when they saw how much money was going to be required to do that. I kind of am going towards agreeing with Alderman Fernsler at this point, that cut our losses on that and bring that thing down. And because I just don't foresee that thing being sold to anybody. Go.
I was just gonna say, I'm not advocating for one way or another, but just so you know what the RDA's thought was, is that, you know, either way, we are potentially spending 15,000 either way. And we've had this property for a couple years, we've had problems with it. I think from their perspective, what they said is, what's another year in the grand scheme of things? And either way, you're gonna be forced, you know, to do something with it anyway. You know, another year probably isn't gonna hurt us, and that was their thought. What's the rush to tear it down? If we take one more year and offer up to 15,000, it's the same as tearing it down. And if someone would take the deal and rehab it, then you keep some property tax base on, but that was the rationale. But I think, as you know, Alderman Williams, I think the feeling of the RDA is that this is such a problem property, and with the loss of parking, the likelihood of something happening here is small.
Alderman Hanson.
Okay, we should probably have a motion before I was debating it, so I'm moving for item 3, relist the property for $1, 15,000 development incentive.
Do we have a second?
To continue discussion, I'll second that.
Okay. You made the motion, Alderman Hanson. You want to make any opening comments?
Well, the RDA apparently had put some time in this and have discussed this, and if they felt it should go another year, that's what we have that organization for. I'm not sure, will it cost us $18,000 next year to raise it, you know, or not, but I guess I'm going on their recommendation, and, you know, they've put some thought into this, and I guess what's one more year gonna cost us? That would be my comment on it.
Okay, second, Alderman Williams, you want to make any comments as a second? Otherwise, we'll go to Alderman Hildebrand. Okay, Alderman Hildebrand.
The number 3, does it have to be incentive to rehab the building for that $15,000?
You mean, I'm not sure what your question is, but if
The neighbor buys the
if-
property,
and I think that becomes a discussion item, that if
becomes a beer garden,
if Kevin was interested, I mean, Kevin's
you could
indicated
use the 15,000 to tear it down.
potentially, if he was willing to then put money into landscaping it to look nice and some sort of secure area, I mean, that is an option.
So the rehab should come
but it-
out of there if that's,
In the end, I think that would have to probably come back to council anyways to approve that, if that expenditure for that reason, because the RDA doesn't have authority to authorize a TIF incentive, the common council does. So either way, it's gonna come back to the common council. If he submitted a proposal and says, I'll tear it down, if you give it to me for $1 and give me the 15,000, but I wanna have a beer garden there and, you know, landscape it, that, if he submitted that proposal in writing, that, either way, it's gonna have to come back to the city council for approval. Because the city council approves the funding, the TIF funding, the RDA holds the property, so both parties have to be involved.
Is there not a possibility that the plan commission would have to get involved?
No.
Sale of property?
No,
No? Okay.
not in this case, because it doesn't have a public purpose.
Okay, Alderman Nelson.
Well, if you could add or redevelop to, you know, to it, so it would read to rehab or redevelop. which would cover the neighbor.
Oh, the motion?
Yes.
Is that an
Would-
amendment to that?
Would first and second agree to the modification?
Yes.
I,
Second? Okay, first and second agree to the modification.
then,
Uh,
can I just have a clarification?
Administrator
Then-
Jurgens.
Then would it be a rehab or redevelopment? Should it be, basically as approved by the RDA then? Or, I mean, because trying to, do you want it to come back? If a proposal is, if you add rehab and redevelopment, do you want it to come back for council approval? Or are you just saying as long as, someone's willing to do something with the piece of property, you're okay with the 15,000 or?
Well, they would have to have some approvals, would they not, and what they actually ended up doing through the planning commission and conditional use and all that. and-
Well, the RDA
Or RDA.
owns the building, so they
Okay.
would sell it. If they're just tearing it down, they just get a raise order from Pete, building inspector.
Okay,
In terms of, would they have to get, a site plan approval if they just landscaped it? I'm not necessarily sure that would, require plan commission approval. If they put some sort of fencing up, we'd probably need to look at that and see if plan commission has to approve that. So I think it depends on what they're actually doing out in that space.
If there was any incentive, that would have to come back to the council though.
Well, that's what I'm
Conceivably,
asking, if,
yeah.
are you just saying, that's what I'm not sure what, if you're just saying, just putting the RDA on notice that you're okay with 15,000 for rehab or redevelopment, which includes landscaping it, and you just want the RDA to know that, or are you saying that you're right now approving a $15,000 incentive as long as the RDA approves it? I'm not sure
Yeah,
what the process you're looking, I just wanted to clarify what process
Well,
in my mind, ultimately, it should come back to the council, cause you're authorizing the TIF incentive, that should be a formal agreement, even if it's a 2-page agreement.
Maybe what we should do is table this for further discussion as RDA discusses what we've discussed to see if there's not something in a shorter time frame than 1 year.
Well, I think that's up, they've already made that motion, I think,
They made a motion for the 1 year.
That's
I
been
think I was the only
discussed.
one that said no, I wanted 6 months.
Correct.
I would like to have seen it more towards summer, but,
Well,
that was
it
more
could be
through as a year,
reconsidered.
so.
I mean, knowing the feeling of the council, they could reconsider that at another meeting and try to move the ball a little bit. I don't know. Alderman Hanson?
I guess my intent would be that we'd offer the incentive of the $1 and $15,000, and if they want to rehab it, it would have to come back to the council. That would be
And-
part of my,
And see where that goes
and then
just
if
with
somebody
their.
buys it in that petition, it'll come back to the council.
okay, just,
Okay.
yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
so
that would be
know
my
the
thought,
process.
and it's,
And I think at that point, that'll start to trigger something else.
especially if the TIF is involved in it too, I think that really
Yeah.
does have to come back to us.
Yep.
Okay? So the motion then would be to sell it for $1 and authorize the incentive at this point. Correct?
So are you saying incentive for rehab and occupation of the building and, or, I'm sorry, or redevelopment of the property?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Understanding that it would, whatever proposal would still come back to the
Correct.
council for approval as well as the RDA.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay? We okay with that? Okay. Clerk will call the roll.
Fernsler.
No.
Hanson.
Yes,
Sedlacek.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Nelson.
yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. It's an interesting situation. Moving on, item B, discussion and action regarding approval to purchase a backhoe for Plymouth Utilities as approved by the 2016 Capital Improvement Plan. Administrator Yergis, did you want to give us
I'll-
some information
No,
on
I'll
that?
just briefly say that this was part of our capital improvement plan, and there's some financial reasons why we're looking to get authorization here in December, even though it's a 2016 budget item. And I'd turn it over to Jim Peterson, the electrical
Okay.
operations manager, to talk a little bit about the backhoe and the quotes he received.
Okay, Jim Peterson, fill us in, please. Welcome.
Good evening. As you all have the four quotations on there from Miller, Bradford, McCain's, and RPM, and Brooks Tractor. Out of those, we have one that's a John Deere, just to give a little comparison of the different equipment that's out there. Miller and Bradford worked with us on this, and they were really the only ones that gave us a really good price as far as trading it in. You know, if we went online, we were looking at and comparing our tractor that we presently have with others out there, and finding that Miller Bradford gave us a tremendous amount more money than what others were offering as a trade-in or a buyout, or putting it online for selling it outright. So with that, I was very impressed with how they worked with us and to get that done. Like Brian had said, it is part of the 2016 budget, and we wouldn't receive this tractor until 2016 also, and the money wouldn't transfer over until 2016 for this tractor. I guess with that being said, I did make a recommendation to go with Miller and Bradford and their tractor. I don't know if you guys have any other questions that you would like to ask.
Before we do that, the chair will entertain a motion, and then why don't you stay up there, Jim, if you would, for questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Slachek.
I'd make a motion to buy the loader backhoe from Miller Bradford for the sum of $82,900.
Second, Alder Hanson.
We have a first and a second. Discussions or questions of Mr. Peterson? I would have one question. Jim, the quoted price of $82,900, how long is that good for?
That's good for, I think it was for,
I mean, I know this is the 16 budget, but
yeah,
I would assume it's available, and the opportunity is now to take advantage of it?
yeah, it is. I think it's a 30-day.
Okay.
The quote, I think,
Right.
is from September, but I know that in talking with Jim, they followed up with us, and then they've extended the quote, but they were looking to try and book the sale in December as part of the transaction versus January, and they wanted this on their sales book, so they've been asking about, can we get authorization yet this year, and given the price difference, that's why we, paid $82,900 being the lowest quote, and that's why we brought it forward at this meeting.
I guess that's why I asked that question specifically, because of the dating and bringing it
Yeah,
forward, so.
I know the date was there, but he had told me that I'm still offering, this is the
Okay.
quotation. He actually finalized the quotation in December 4th,
Yeah,
and that's when I put everything together and gave it to Brian, so.
okay. Any other questions of Mr. Peterson? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Nelson.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Fernsler.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Sedlacek.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Motion carried, thank you. Next item, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn until January 12th, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
First and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?